This rotund fellow is not the Buddha. Or at least not yet. More on that in a minute. But honestly, I don't blame you for thinking he is the Buddha. That's a common misconception. This is actually Budai, a possibly historical Chinese monk believed to have lived around the 10th century CE. But as I was sourcing footage and images for this video, the search query Budai was almost useless on these websites. I always needed to type in laughing Buddha or fat Buddha to find results. But even if Budai is not the Buddha, he's still a fascinating figure in Buddhism, weaving together religious prophecy, folk devotion, and the eccentricities of Zen Buddhism. So if he's not the Buddha, who is Budai, and what does he represent? Now, we don't exactly know if Budai was a real person. As far as historians can tell, he may have been a Chan monk who lived sometime in the 9th or early 10th century CE, during the twilight years of the Tang Dynasty. As we talk about in another video, Chan Buddhism is better known as Zen Buddhism, and it's a lineage of Mahayana Buddhism that emerged in China that emphasizes direct insight of one's Buddha nature, or the inherent capacity to become a Buddha. And let me tell you, Chan Buddhism has its fair share of eccentric personalities. His name Budai is actually a nickname, meaning cloth sack, which tells you something about his vibe. He starts appearing in early Song Dynasty sources, such as the Song biographies of eminent monks dating to 988 CE, or the Chan compendium known as the Record of the Transmission of the Lamp, dating to 1004 CE, both of which describe Budai as an eccentric monk named Chitsa. The transmission of the lamp describes him as rather plump, with a wrinkled forehead and big belly. The words that came out were not coherent. He would lie down to sleep just where he happened to be, carried a cloth bag on the end of his staff in which he hoarded all bits and pieces offered to him. People of the time called him Big Bag Boy, or Master Cloth Bag. So these early sources portray him as a free spirit figure in the Chan community, living as a vagabond, sleeping wherever he wants, and carrying his few possessions in his very large bag. And he was also a wonder worker, a master fortune teller who could predict the weather. The transmission of the lamp says sometimes he would sell things from his sack and they would ask him to tell their fortunes, which invariably came true. Budai's hagiographies are peppered with other miraculous episodes. In one story, a layman bathing alongside him sees a third eye on Budai's back. The man tries to touch the eye and asks if he's a Buddha, but Budai quickly cuts him off and urges him not to tell anyone. Another time when asked his age, Budai replies that his cloth bag was as old as the empty sky. These stories signal that Budai was not an ordinary monk, and maybe not an ordinary human either, which we'll get into shortly. He was considered a Chan master, a deeply awakened individual with profound wisdom to share. He's described teaching the Dharma through cryptic gestures. In one story, a fellow monk asks him, "What is the essence of the Dharma?" And Budai just silently drops his bag. When asked, then how do you practice it? He picks the bag back up and walks away. That's classic Chan Buddhism. Chan masters often taught using koans, paradoxical statements or dialogues meant to short-circuit logical thinking and jolt students into a moment of insight. This here is kind of like a koan in action, cryptic behavior that you need to decipher and meditate on. His favorite teaching tool apparently was being mildly annoying to people. In the 13th century text Jipan's account of the history of Buddhism, the text describes a time when a monk asked Budai what he was doing by the roadside. Budai replied, "I'm waiting for someone to come." The monk said, "Well, here I am." Budai then randomly pulled an orange from his robe and offered it to him. But just as the monk reached out, Budai snatched it back and said, "You're not the one." Okay, what does that mean? Well, that's for you to figure out. Or another time, a monk asked him a common Chan koan. How would this have been the intention of the patriarch master when he came from the West? A reference to Bodhidharma, the Indian monk who, according to tradition, brought Chan Buddhism to China. The question is meant to probe whether someone's current actions or understanding truly reflect the essence of Bodhidharma's teachings. Like in that previous story, Budai just dropped his bag and stood quietly. When the monk then pressed for a deeper answer, Budai picked up his bag and walked away. And as the monk himself walked away, suddenly Budai tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Give me a coin." And my personal favorite, one time Budai scrawled a note on a public bathroom. "I have been begging for alms and just arrived. You may not urinate or defecate here." Basically, you're not allowed to use the public bathroom because I'm here asking for alms. These sources describe him as what you might call a holy fool, the kind of person who seems ridiculous at first, but who might actually be awakened underneath all that eccentricity. Kind of like Yoda pretending to be a goofy Muppet when Luke first meets him in The Empire Strikes Back, when he's really a Jedi Master behind all that silliness. So by worldly standards, Budai seems to be a vagrant eccentric, but in the Chan Buddhist perspective, he manifests the ease and bliss of awakening in his own quirky yet profound way. So from these early Song Dynasty sources, Budai emerges as a Chan monk whose eccentric antics made him a local folk hero, who was quickly elevated in popular imagination to something more. We can't be sure, but historians think it's at least possible he was a historical figure, but the sources we have are hagiographical. That is, they read more like saintly legends than sober biographies. They're filled with miracle stories, cryptic teachings, and larger-than-life episodes that make it hard to separate fact from devotional fiction. Hence, many scholars call him a semi-legendary monk. Let's turn now to his iconic look. Visual representations of him started to emerge around the same time as these literary accounts, and they spread across China to Japan and Korea, where he became known as Hotei and Podai respectively. One of the earliest depictions of Budai can be found in the rock-cut temple complex Feilifeng, located in Hangzhou, China. Carved during the Song Dynasty in the 1100s or 1200s, this sculpture already captures the key features that would define Budai's iconography for centuries to come: a big sack, a big smile, and a loosened robe displaying his big belly. His casual posture and overall informal vibe stands in stark contrast with more solemn Buddhist iconography, and people have read all kinds of symbolism to each part of Budai's look. His big belly has been interpreted as representing abundance and prosperity. His bag from which he gets his nickname represents his simple life, free of attachments. Others say it represents the burdens of human desires and suffering that he carries lightly. Still others say it represents his generosity. Some stories say he would pull candy from his bag for children, or whatever the poor would ask for. And his laughing face represents the joy that comes from true awakening. He's often depicted in whimsical scenes in traditional Chinese and Japanese art, laughing or playing with children. In Japan, Hotei surrounded by children became a common art theme in the Edo period, emphasizing him as a being of contentment and domestic well-being. Woodblock prints like this one from the 19th century represent him almost like a grandfatherly figure, smiling as he marches along with happy kids. In these early Song Dynasty sources, we also see the emergence of the defining feature of Budai's veneration in later Buddhism: his identification with Maitreya, the future Buddha awaited in Buddhist eschatology, or theology focused on the end of the present age. See, in Buddhism, there's not just one Buddha. There have been many in the past, and more are expected in the future. Siddhartha Gautama, the historical figure most people think of as the Buddha, or Shakyamuni Buddha, is just one in a long line. Maitreya Buddha is believed to be the next Buddha. Right now, though, he's chilling in Tushta, a celestial realm where future Buddhas hang out before their earthly debut. And he's waiting for the exact right moment to descend to Earth, achieve awakening, and teach the Dharma to the world that has forgotten the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. In medieval China, revolutionary movements rose and fell centered around Maitreya's imminent arrival, often in response to social and political crises, with charismatic leaders claiming to be Maitreya incarnate. At the same time, Buddhist schools were developing their own Maitreya practices, some focused on visualization techniques to connect with Maitreya in Tushta, while others emphasized the recitation of Maitreya's name as a form of devotion. So how does Budai factor into any of this? Traditional depictions of Maitreya show him as a princely figure, often wearing a crown and jewelry, the picture of regal serenity. On the other hand, Budai looks like he never met a meal he didn't like and a joke he couldn't laugh at. These two figures couldn't be more different. The future Buddha versus an eccentric vagabond monk. Well, before his death, Budai reportedly chanted a mysterious poem. Maitreya, true Maitreya, manifested in billions of forms. Constantly he reveals himself to men, yet the people of this age do not recognize him. These mysterious lines were interpreted as Budai declaring himself an incarnation of Maitreya, unrecognized by those around him. The song biographies of eminent monks dating to 988 CE quotes a shorter version. Maitreya, Maitreya, people today fail to recognize him. This is the first text to explicitly connect Budai with Maitreya. In effect, Budai's final act was a revealed identity. He was Maitreya in the flesh, a rustic Buddha-to-be who lived among ordinary people. This claim resonated strongly among Song Dynasty Buddhists, and Budai's Maitreya identity gained traction in both monastic and lay circles. Chan masters invoked it in their teachings. For example, the recorded sayings of the Chan master Dahui notes, "If we bow down to Maitreya Buddha, we can rely on Budai's broad intestine and big belly." In other words, venerating Maitreya is effectively venerating Budai. Sayings like this suggest that within Chan thought, Budai was accepted as an incarnation of Maitreya, illustrating that the future Buddha can be found here and now if you have the insight. We also see this belief in that sculpture of Budai at the Feilafeng Cave Temple. The 18 figures who flank Budai are the 18 Arhats, or Luohans, enlightened disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha according to Chinese Buddhism, who are seen as guardians of the Dharma who remain in the world to protect Buddhist teachings until the coming of Maitreya. The decision to place Budai at the center of this group makes a strong theological point. This was not just an eccentric monk. This was the future Buddha. You just don't recognize it yet. Sent into the world not to rule from on high, but to mingle with the common people. This had an eschatological subtext. Rather than awaiting Maitreya's distant descent from Tushta, Chan masters taught that Maitreya's compassionate presence was already manifest in the world. In typical Chan fashion, the lofty future Buddha was brought down to earth as a laughing monk, a teaching that awakening may appear in unexpected, humble guises. And ordinary laypeople outside of monastic circles enthusiastically embraced Budai's Maitreya persona. Records from the Song dynasty onward describe people painting his image, making offerings, and celebrating him in connection with Maitreya. In effect, Budai became the popular face of Maitreya all over East Asia. In Chinese Buddhist temples, even today, the statue of Maitreya in the front hall is often Budai, rather than the traditional princely form of Maitreya. And over the centuries, Budai blended into the broader fabric of East Asian popular religion. In Chinese popular religion, Budai assumed the role of a folk prosperity deity. Effectively, he became a friendly patron whom anyone, Buddhist or otherwise, could invoke for luck or abundance. It was not unusual for a household shrine or a shop altar in China to feature a Budai statue with incense and offerings, much like how you would honor folk deities like the stove god or fortune god. And to this day, you'll see people rubbing or patting his belly for good luck. In Japan, Budai, or Hotei as he's called in Japanese, was integrated into the Shichi Fukujin, or the Seven Lucky Gods. This was a group of deities that emerged around the 15th century and became a central part of Japanese New Year celebrations. Each god represents a particular virtue and promises some form of good fortune. Unsurprisingly, Hotei's specialty is generosity. On New Year's Day, he's said to sail down from the heavens aboard a treasure ship alongside the other lucky gods, and with his magical bag, he hands out treasures and gifts to kids. He's almost like a Buddhist Santa Claus figure, and I'm not just saying that. Some Japanese temples literally dress him up like Santa around Christmas. But Hotei is still a respected figure in Japanese Zen monasteries, so he kinda has a dual life in Japan, both as a folk god in the context of popular religion, and an awakened monk and future Buddha among Zen Buddhists. And over the last 100 years, Budai's image has traveled far beyond Asia, largely through the Chinese diaspora and international art trade. By the 20th century, small statues of a so-called fat Buddha became common curiosities in Western households and restaurants, symbolizing an exotic charm of prosperity. Paradoxically, Budai became one of the most globally recognized figures associated with Buddhism, while at the same time being widely misidentified as Shakyamuni Buddha. Though in some sense, Budai is no stranger to taking on different forms. From semi-legendary monk to eschatological figure to popular deity, his identity has always been fluid, shaped by the needs and imaginations of the communities that embrace him. And speaking of mistaken identities, over on Nebula, I've just released a new episode in my ongoing series, Sacred Spaces, where I explore the Red Basilica in Western Turkey, a massive Roman-era temple that was misidentified for years as a sanctuary to the Egyptian gods. But recent research tells a different story. Sacred Spaces is a bonus series that I publish on Nebula, where I take you behind the scenes to places I've personally visited, religious sites that I've stood in, filmed, and reflected on. Nebula is a streaming service built by and for independent creators, and it's home to tons of thoughtful content you won't find anywhere else. Original documentaries, video essays, comedy series, and more. For example, we just published a new heavy-hitting documentary called 17 Pages. It examines one of the largest scientific controversies of the 20th century, which all began with an ethics question over a single biology paper only 17 pages long. It caught the attention of the national media and the US Congress. We also just renewed for a second season the excellent new comedy series Abolish Everything. It features comedian abolitionists roasting a pet peeve that they want banned from society, while a panel of improv comedians argue on behalf of the status quo. These are the kind of ambitious, creator-led projects you'll find on Nebula, videos that are smart, curious, and unafraid to take risks. If you sign up using my link nebula.tv/legendforbreakfast, you'll get 40% off an annual subscription, which comes out to be just $36 for a full year or just $3 a month. And if you prefer to skip monthly payments entirely, there's also a lifetime membership available for $300. Pay once and get access forever. And again, that's nebula.tv/legendforbreakfast. Thanks everyone.